Well, good evening. Hi, I'm Will McNeil, CEO and founder of Black Tech Jobs. We're super excited to have you join us tonight for Cocktails, Tech, and Opportunity. Hopefully, you've been able to log in, get settled. We've got two great speakers joining us tonight. And just in case this is your first time connecting with Black Tech Jobs, our mission is to connect the Black tech community to the broader business and technology communities. And the way we show up in our communities in three ways, making those connections. One, through the job board at blacktechjobs.com, so active job seekers can find their next role. Second is we're an executive search firm helping middle career and senior Black tech executives find new roles on a one-to-one basis. And third, we're a full-fledged diversity consultancy. We help companies find their way in their diversity journey, no matter where they may start. But without further ado, I want to introduce our two guests and move quickly to our discussion. This is an unusual event where we bring together two Black CIOs to engage in a conversation about technology, diversity, and business. And this is an interactive session. So I want you to feel free to to ask any question that you may have of our panelists. We'll start first alphabetically with Jeff Douglas, who's the CIO of Potbelly Sandwich Works. Let's welcome Jeff to the show, please. Jeff.
Hey, good evening. How are you?
Doing great, man. Doing great. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you being a part of Coffee, Tech, and Opportunity. I also want to bring in our other guest, Van Richardson, the CIO of iManage. Van, welcome to the show tonight. We appreciate you joining us. Van, again, is the CIO of iManage. And we'll start first with letting both of you introduce yourselves. If you could tell us a little bit about your company and your current role, what you do, and also a little something personal. How about we just talk a little bit about your first car and the worst career advice you've ever gotten? Jeff, we'll start with you alphabetically.
Okay. So obviously, Jeff Douglas, I'm CIO at Potbelly. Many of you logged in. If you're from the Midwest area, you're familiar with Potbelly. Hopefully you had a rec today. If not, you're running to get a cookie, oatmeal chocolate chip cookie in a minute. I am responsible for obviously all of technology for Potbelly. So that includes the user interfacing capabilities from the web and the app, and then obviously all the back-end infrastructure, security, and data and everything like that. So let's see. First car, it was a Toyota Celica. It was brown, which is the worst color for a car in my mind. No offense to anybody who's got a brown car, but the quick 2-second story is my sister gave me the car. My sister is 8 years older than me. My father gave her the car. She drove the car, never changed the oil or anything like that. And a tree fell on it in Oak Park, Illinois. And so the insurance company gave her the car and gave her the money. And so she gave me the car. And so as an eager 16-year-old, what did I do? I put an engine in it and popped the roof back out and started driving it. I drove that car from my junior year in high school all the way through my sophomore year in college.
Wow. That's a great story.
That was my first car. Worst piece of career advice I received?
Yeah. Worst. Yeah.
It's interesting. We'll talk about backgrounds and everything as we kind of go along, but probably the worst career advice is I was asking not an immediate manager, but another manager in my company about advice moving into management. And the response was, well, we're all sysadmins. Why would you want to move into management? And this was a manager of color in the company that I was working for. And I kind of crocked my head and it just resonated with me. That's probably not the best advice if somebody is trying to figure out how to advance their career. Either you help them on that path or direct them to somebody to help them on that path. But it seemed as though the advice that was given was kneecap. This is as good as it's going to get. And that was probably the worst advice I've ever received in my career.
And I can imagine that happens to a lot of people, honestly, because sometimes leaders, whether they're senior or first level leaders, they may not be able to see you or imagine you at that level or higher at their stage in their career. So, um, word of caution to those folks who are watching. Van, we're going to switch to you. Tell us about what you do there at iManage. Maybe a little bit about what iManage does as well, if people aren't familiar with you, because you guys are a B2B organization primarily, and a little bit about your first car and the worst advice you've gotten in your career.
Sure. Van Richardson, based out of Chicago. I'm CIO of iManage. iManage is a leading document management firm with specialized focus on AI and cloud. So we interact with fintech, legal tech organizations. So whenever you're doing big case negotiations and looking at those dockets and just trying to figure out what's the right decision to make, we provide solutions for those. And we recently acquired a company called Closing Folders, which also allows for, it's sort of the closing documents of organizations on steroids. So
Wow.
instead, when you see all these huge thousands of documents, it takes all the legwork out of determining, like, okay, did I sign this paper? No, we basically automate that process and make it easier for those that are going to be executions of those things. Hear my little one in the background, and that tends to happen at this time of the night. But so one of the things I'm responsible for outside of this one here is got a little bit distracted. So one of the things I'm responsible for is just making sure that we drive technology solutions across the entire organization. So I've got everything from systems, IT infrastructure, and corporate IT applications a part of my group.
Okay, awesome. And worst career advice that you've gotten, Van. So for those of you who don't know him, you're not aware of Van's celebrity. Van was recently featured in CIO magazine. Great article. We've posted it on our page, on our LinkedIn page. So if you haven't seen it, feel free to check us out at Black Tech Jobs. There's a great article. Van's feedback and comments about escalating his career, being Black in technology are fantastic. We'll get into some of that today. But Van, tell us about the worst career advice that you've received.
Actually, the one right before that is I had an 81 silver Monte Carlo. I rode that car to the wheels fell off. But it was a trucker. And then the last piece was the worst career advice, and it sort of goes back to the latter topic you just mentioned. It was it was more of, why do you want to do this sort of job? What is important to you about it? And they were like, well, you don't qualify. You do good sysadmin work. You do good networking work. Why are you doing it? So that was basically, and that basically was one of those things that just sort of just left you hanging right there, and that was it.
Yeah, it brings me to kind of our first question. When there was a time in your career that you had to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I can be a CIO. How did you know you had what it took? Because I'm in this space all the time. I know a lot of Black CIOs, but I'm one of the few people that can say that. There aren't a lot of you. When they talk about unicorns of unicorns, you two represent the purest of the unicorn species. And we'll start with you, Jeff. How did you know that you had what it took? And what happened that made you believe that you were ready? And then what happened after that?
I would say that, for me, the more your peers see you in a certain role, the more you have to realize, okay, maybe I'm beyond where I am. Okay. I'll give you an example. The company I was with, there was a leadership change, and your mindset is, when you're in a large company, is to just think about what's your next step up. Literally step up, not the stairs, not the next level. No, just one step up. What's the next step? Am I going from director to VP? Am I going from VP to senior VP? Whatever it may be. And so when you have a leadership change, and when you have all of your peers that have been coming to you for questions that aren't necessarily just infrastructure related or just software development related or data related, but across the board, you start to realize, okay, well, maybe I do have this ability to be broad-based, right? And as a CIO, you know, Van, you can comment too, but as a CIO, you have to be broad-based. You're not deep anywhere other than where you originally came in, but you're broad-based. So when you start realizing that, okay, I'm viewed by my peers this way, there's a leadership change, maybe it's now time to make this jump, okay? Do I have enough ability to make this jump? And quite often that happens in another company. You leave the company that you're in and you go someplace else and you make that leap. But it really comes down to, you have to have the self-confidence, and sometimes you just don't realize that you're doing the job anyway. You know, you've been put into 5, 6, 7 different roles in different parts of technology. You're doing the job anyway. Make the leap. But sometimes you have to get out of the company that you're in to do that.
No, good feedback. Van, how about you? How did you know you had what it took, and when you knew that, what did you do?
I would say that one of the things that I experienced was more of just like I always had the hunger to sort of say, hey, well, how are they doing that? You know, what can I replicate to sort of emulate what they're doing? And when I started doing that, I saw that one, that I could actually get it done, you know, sometimes even better than the way my peers were doing it, or the others associated that were in those roles doing those things. And it made me think like, well, there's something other than, you know, being the sysadmin that's sort of, you know, keeping the systems up at night and being the first one that's on call, closing the most tickets and doing all those sort of things. You know, when I started seeing that sort of shift, and then people starting to ask me for advice and say, hey, how would you make a decision on this? What would be your next thoughts? And when I started getting calls from my boss or business leaders and started asking those questions, I was like, crap, you know, this is something that I actually might want to consider a longer term. And one important thing that I'll say, a previous boss, I overheard him saying about his boss, which was the CIO. He said, yeah, you're not going to get any further if you don't have this sort of level of credentialing, or if you don't have this certain experience. So he basically crapped on him and said, and he wasn't a person of color. So it was just like, okay, well, that road's harder for me. So it made me start thinking, like, what could I do then to sort of get to that position?
You know, it's funny how these invisible roadblocks that people put on other people because of what they think or believe, and that stops careers or make people pause. You know, one of the things I loved about both of your stories is that I thought I heard both of you at some point say that you were a sysad. And so, and let me be clear, that's a long way away from the CIO seat. And I spent a little time mentoring or talking to some folks who are sysads or folks who've recently gotten certifications. And I also meet people who've been sysads for 5 or 10 years. And one of the most disappointing experiences I have is when I meet a 40-year-old sysad. That tells me that something's gone wrong in leadership and something's gone wrong in coaching. So I want to pivot a little bit and talk to you about kind of leadership and the relationships that you've acquired in your professional career. So there's a 2-part question. One, do you have a mentor, a professional mentor? And if so, describe your relationship with your professional mentor. And then maybe even talk about who they are, male, female, their ethnic background, if they're older than you, about the same age. So I think that's helpful to understand what mentoring looks like, because it doesn't look the same for everyone. And you probably have more than one. So because I've said a lot, to clarify my question again, if you have a mentor, describe your mentor, describe that relationship. We'll start with you, Jeff.
Sure. I've never had an explicit mentor, meaning a relationship that was defined specifically for the purpose of mentorship. I've had many mentors throughout my career. And so probably the biggest mentor that I had was a previous boss, who is not of color, 10 years older than me. And we were in the infrastructure space. Without explicitly saying, hey, I believe in you, I'm going to give you opportunity, I'm going to give you a chance, he almost treated me as an equal, listened to what I was saying, evaluated what I was saying, critiqued what I was saying, allowed me to critique what he was saying. And it was his behavior in bringing me along through the experiences he had being 10 years older than me, just allowed me to grow. So I think it was more of an informal mentor relationship. I mean, if I were to ask him today, was he my mentor? Yeah, he probably would say yes. Was there anybody that would say, oh, yes, that was Jeff's mentor? No, nobody would say that. So I've had that informal relationship, but I've never had an explicit defined relationship. But I have had it the other way, where I've had mentees that has been explicitly defined. This is your mentee. You're bringing them along in this industry.
Got it. Got it. How about you, Van? Have you had a mentor? And if so, can you describe that relationship?
Yeah, it was more indirectly, similar to Jeff's experience. I've had actually two guys that I would say that provided some level of mentorship, but not assigned. One would have been, about 20, I'm dating myself, 20, 24, 25 years ago. It was a brother working, and he actually owned his own IT space. And he was doing big business in Chicago, and I met him, I think, actually in a bookstore, and I was looking at sysadmin books like Windows NT books or something like that back in the day, and he just saw me looking at the books, and he was like, "Hey, what are you looking at? Hey, I own an IT consulting firm. Hey." If he's listening, I'm sure he'll he'll send me a note. But it was like, hey, why don't you come work with us? And I granted, I was already in IT then, but he sort of showed me that there was other folks that are doing this, that actually are doing things. And then there was another gentleman, not a man of color, but he actually gave me my first real opportunity, I would say, at like leadership. It was a public company. I went there and I got there and it was a whole chaos. They were doing help desk tickets from Exchange public folders, if you know anything about those back in the day. And I said, this is ridiculous. So I went there as a senior sysadmin, and then I quickly evolved to like the manager of corporate IT and data center, just because I was like, dude, you guys are freaking, we got to do something. But he took I basically made the role myself. And he was like, okay. And he took it to CEO, and it happened. But that was sort of, they took the opportunity and saw that I guess had some sort of level of quality, and nurtured it from there.
And what I hear a couple of things from that story, Van. One I hear is going into an environment where things are broken creates an opportunity. And then when you recognize the opportunity, exploiting it by providing a solution, that creates an opportunity for you to elevate your career. So for those of us who go to work and you discover that, you've got 20 things to complain about, what's not right about the way things are structured, the technology that you're using, the process that are developing, the way that communication is happening, it presents a career opportunity. And sometimes you don't notice that people are noticing you. Whether or not you're aware, someone is watching and capturing either positive or negative images. If you just continue to produce those and look for those opportunities, because and also what we see, sometimes those windows open and then they close. So I want to shift the question to that thought. Is there a time in your career that an opportunity opened and revealed itself and you missed it, and what you learned from that experience? Meaning you didn't take it, you said you told yourself you weren't ready, or some other self-talk or self-actualization that took you in pause. Jeff, we'll start with you. Have you had an experience where you've missed an opportunity?
Yeah, I have, but I'm just trying to think, would I define it as an opportunity today? As you said, we were both sysadmins. So when you're in the sysadmin space, sometimes you have an opportunity to shift into something else. So let's just, if you're, let's say, a storage admin and you want to move into the Linux world, or you want to move into the networking world or something like that, those opportunities had come up and I had kind of stayed my lane trying to go towards management. But had I taken advantage of those opportunities, I don't know, would I have had a more rapid ascent? Would I have got stuck? I'm not 100% sure, but I haven't really come across many opportunities that were advancing my career in the way in which I wanted to advance it that I didn't take advantage of. Now, there have been a couple of times in which I did take advantage of it. It didn't work out as I thought. But most of the time when the opportunity came up, I was able to assess it and take advantage of it at that time.
Okay. How about you, Van?
Yeah, I think my case was it wasn't about sort of staying in the lane of infrastructure or service delivered or things like that. It was more of just like, it was always an opportunity to take on more responsibility, and that would be on the technical aspect. And my initial guts were like, oh yeah, I need to keep on doing that because I can become an expert in that. But I realized quickly that I didn't always want to be that person that was going to be doing those specific things. So the times I had the opportunity to sort of say, hey, do you want to be a project manager, or do you want to do some of those other certain things? And honestly, I'll admit, the early days I would say, oh yeah, I can do this. And some of them were epic fail. But it wasn't the one. I never wanted to sort of be the one that would always end up though sort of saying, crap, I didn't at least try it.
Okay.
But then of course, as you mature over your sort of career, you sort of start to say, yeah, I need to get people for that, or have the right person for that task, because that is not my expertise. So those are some of the things that I would have said I've learned over the years. And just honestly, sometimes just being able to say no, it's not, or just pass, because we have a propensity to sort of just keep on.
Yeah.
And just being learning when to say when is what I've had to come to.
That brings me to, I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So for the audience members, this is a two-way conversation. We're going to ask that if you can start chatting your questions. So while we have Jeff Douglas, the CIO of Potbelly Sandwich Works, and Van Richardson, CIO of iManage on the line, we'd love to have you have your questions answered. I'm going to ask two more questions, then the rest of the evening is going to be turned over to the audience. And so one of them is this thing called microaggressions. We've heard a lot about that in a more aggressive movement for equity and inclusion, and probably more so for diversity. And so my question for both of you is not if you've dealt with them, but how you've dealt with them, because I'm just going to go under the assumption that they have knocked on your door at some point. How, and the two-part question is, how have you dealt with them in the past, in the earlier parts of your career, lessons learned from that? And then today, as you manage them, how do you deal with them today? And then is there any advice you would give to those Black tech professionals, or even people who are not Black, who are watching and leaning in, or trying to learn from either other observed behavior or behavior that they've contributed to? How would you recommend people handle those things today? And Jeff, we're going to keep going alphabetical with you. Van, having a V first name, it's a double whammy. So but it obviously works. Sitting in the back of the classroom never caused a problem, because you're CIO at iManage. So Jeff, we'll start with you.
You get the benefit of all the answers. So I would say that the thing you have to focus on when you're talking about microaggressions is you have to be who you are. And I'll explain that in that you don't want to say you have to be unapologetically Black, or whatever your ethnicity is, or whatever your gender is, but you have to be who you are, so much so that your peers operate in a space where they're comfortable with you being who you are. And I'm describing that to say that when I first came along, I was very comfortable in any sort of environment. I went to school in Hoffman Estates, 2,500 students, 50 of them were Black, right? So I was comfortable in a multiracial environment, not any issues there. But you cannot suppress who you are. I grew up in a Black church. I went to a Black college, university, and I live in a Black neighborhood. So I'm not throwing it in anybody's face, but I want my peers, my leadership group, to be comfortable with who I am, the organizations I belong to, the things that I do on the weekends. But by no means am I not tolerant or understanding of what it is that they do. So if I feel if I make them comfortable with who I am, I'm comfortable with who they are, then those microaggressions start to go down. And we don't have situations where you're unintentionally offending me or offending somebody else. That's the way in which I've tried to deal with it as I've gotten older, lost hair, things like that. But that's how I look at it.
Right. Van?
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation, because one of the things that and I put it in the CIO article. It was in other articles, but it's been, most cases you're the only one in the room, and that in itself brings a level of either nervousness or microaggressions, because sometimes people team up on you, or they feel that if you don't qualify, or they feel like it's not right for you, then you shouldn't be there. So I what I've learned is and my dad taught me this, is sort of, walk in, do the best job that you can, and then you hope that you will be treated fairly. But don't be blind if you're not treated fairly, to sort of sit back and let it lie there. So and I think that was very foundational, because it taught me to sort of be responsible or professional in any situation. However, don't burn any bridges. But also hold yourself accountable, to lead and direct your team as appropriate. And when I've been in situations where it's been a bit awkward or tough, I know enough on how to best manage myself to make sure that I'm holding on to my own morals, I would say. And I think that's what sort of keeps me going. And however, I will say that, given the situation or whatever environment I'm in, you sort of adapt, but you don't let yourself go. Similar with Jeff mentioned, you still hold on to those same things that sort of are your foundation. I am similar to him. I grew up in Chicago South. Well, I grew up in the South Side, so you say something wrong, my ear might go up and say, Did you just say something that I just didn't?" And we will, so it's funny. It I think one of the jokes is that I won't say it that way, but things recall things that will make me respond differently to you. But at most, I think it's just being responsible and trying to be a remote role model, for those. And one of the things I find all the time now is, given the platform and sort of the visibility of the roles, and even with me being a Sigma, people are asking me questions to help out with tech, or giving them advice or mentor or things like that. I have a bigger things in play, I think, and I try to make sure that I use those as examples and teaching moments for those microaggressions and this career experience as well.
Awesome. And actually, what I'll do is I'm going to get smarter here, Van. I'm going to come back to you and skip Jeff, because Jeff has had the pleasure of doing the tee up, and you've got help there, Van. So you're not alone. So you have an additional 2 years of technical experience in the room, that can help you out and answer questions. So my question for you is, what role has networking played in your career? At Black Tech Jobs, we talk about it a lot, and we talk about how networks have a bigger influence on your career outcomes in many cases than your core skills. It's almost like having a billboard. If you put it out in the forest, no matter how great the marketing is, if no one sees it, it never gets recognized. Can you talk a bit about how your network has helped your career and exposed you to opportunities and helped you build your team?
I think, as you start moving to some levels of, higher levels of management, those who you are connected to is definitely a positive, or it definitely sort of opens up various conversation paths. But I remember when I was sysadmin and doing some other work, it was just sort of saying, "Hey, I got a question. I can ask you, how did you solve this sort of issue?" And it helped out even at those levels. So it was very influential and positive then. I'd also think that now we're in a social age of everything is online. You post something now, anybody might see it, and so I think that now it makes you sort of think about being more responsible, with even your communications, your conversations, who you even networked with. Because one thing you don't necessarily, it's great when the ride is high and everybody's sailing strong, but when it goes the other way and you tie it to this person, you have to remember what you said, or what things you agreed with, because it will come back. So I think it's very important, but it definitely has helped. I remember I was at a CIO event a couple of years ago when I was at Grubhub. I met with I met Mark Randolph from Netflix, and we had a weird conversation. I was actually trying to pitch a business that I was looking at that I was trying to do, and he was like, "Yeah, you need to think about it more," and that was it. But I was able to sort of put facial recognition to that, and that actually benefited me. I'll tell you, as a part of this conversation, because I actually went to his website later on, and I found a bug on his website. And I sent it to an email that was attached to his website, and he retweeted me back on Twitter. It was like, "Yo, this guy gets it. He's trying to solve my problems." But now I've got, so, but it's just those things help, and it just shows that you're gritty and are going to keep on going.
Yeah. And we have a few questions that are brewing up. And for those of you who've posted questions, I have not forgotten about you. We're absolutely going to kind of come back. I want to give Jeff a chance to answer that question, and then we're going to start diving into the audience questions. And I want to encourage everyone to continue to post your questions, because we're going to try to get to all of them if possible. Jeff, how about you? How has your network served you both in your career ascent, as well as you building out your team?
So networking in general is something that historically I have not been I've not been very good at, I should say. I probably shouldn't say good at. It's not something that is always top of mind for me. And as I've grown older and I've changed positions, and you get into higher levels of management, you start to realize that, that you have to, one, participate in networking in every way, shape, and form for two reasons. One, people may need to hear from you. That's one thing that I just never realized in time. You have your peers, you have folks that you're talking to, but you never know who's listening. And as you rise in management, you start to realize that something you may have said in a small setting got to a larger group of people, and you need to be able to go out and connect with people and share your ideas with them. But in return, you're going to get ideas from them. You're going to get thoughts from them. And that's just not something that I had really participated in for quite some time. And I've learned over time, you have to network. You have to do that. Now, having said that, yeah, I probably have always been doing it my whole life. Jobs that I've got to have been through networking. People that I've met have been through networking. And I think that it's incredibly important. But just, I always think back on it and say, well, what if you had actually focused on it and actually had been more intentional in networking, as opposed to just letting it be a side effect of your interactions as you go through life. So I think it's incredibly important, but it's incredibly important that you're sharing with your group as well as you're getting from your group. From a team perspective, I encourage, to Van's point, I encourage my team to meet as many people and to talk to as many people and to learn from as many people as possible. Your interactions are going to shape who you are. And it's just amazing how a small interaction can just catapult you and skyrocket you into a particular area, whether it's you're adept at security and you meet a security professional at a Black Hat conference. And then the next thing you know, and I do have a guy that used to work for me, is very prominent in the security space. He was interested. He did some networking, introduced him to some people. That was important. Even if you're talking about within your own company, it's important to network with the various other departments and levels of people within your company, because you never know who's listening to you and is interested in what you're saying. Maybe not in your domain, maybe in another domain, but you just never know what you're able to offer to other people. So it's important to just have that interaction as much as possible within your company, outside your company, as much as you possibly can. I encourage my team to do that all the time.
And I'll share something with you. I asked this question for a reason. So, being an executive recruiter in my firm, we talk to a lot of people, and the number one way to find a job in America today, regardless of your vocation, is employee referral systems. And Harvard Business Review did a piece on it. LinkedIn did a piece on it last year. 80% of jobs that are found in America are found as a result of employee referral systems. Now, the challenge with that is that's also the greatest contributor to homogenous workplaces. And so people typically refer people who look like them. And so when we talk about networking, we're talking about the importance of being connected to people who can make hiring decisions has a humongous impact on your career, both today and in the future, and in combination with not just your promotions, but the types of projects that you get assigned, your assignments in general. And those are the things that provide you a profile within your organization to find your next promotion. I want to shift gears here a little bit. There's a number of questions that posted. I want to go back to, I think it's Anonymous Girl who asked the question. I'm going to post it up here so that everyone can see it. She says, my name is Sasha. It's more challenging to get job interviews when you is it more challenging to get job interviews when you self-identify as Black, female, or male on a job application? What's been your experience? So if someone submits that they are Black or are female or are disabled, are they likely to help or hurt themselves?
So I'll jump in first because Jeff's taking the the path first for a few. I've always self-identified, period. I mean, and it just I don't have a point of reference that it hasn't helped. But I do know that we're in a social world now, so people are looking you up before you even get to anything these days. Whether you're on social or not, they're looking at resumes or looking at social posts or looking at everything. So I do it, and I know it's a personal decision, but I think that it has definitely not been an issue for me, and I would suggest that you would do it.
Yeah, I would agree. First of all, as a hiring manager, most of the time, that's not the area I'm looking at. All right. So whether you identify as a Black male or female, that's not something I'm looking at. I'm going to look at your skill set. I'm going to look at your resume and the composition overall. And then, yeah, as Van said, I'm going to go to LinkedIn and see who are you, right? So identifying as a Black male or female when looking for a job, absolutely do it. It goes back to the previous question about microaggressions. You have to be who you are, because if you walk into a job, you walk into an interview, I don't want to say pretending, but trying to be somebody you are not, that's not going to work. So be who you are, identify who you are. And if the company is casting you aside because of that, there are other ways to deal with that. There are other ways to work through that. Most companies have diversity and inclusion teams that try and balance that out, but that's no reason for you not to identify.
And I've honestly, I've not been even put in a position that would make me sort of decide between this person being of this race or gender. It's something I'm not looking for, and I think that Jeff's spot on. Your skills, your experience, all those things should shine for you.
There is one exception to that, I would say, to what you just said, Van. There are certain times in which you want to have a diverse team. And if I have a team of all 40-year-old men, it helps to have a non-40-year-old man on the team. So there are times in which I will look and make sure that the recruiters bringing me resumes are bringing me a diverse slate. And when they bring me a diverse slate, 9 times out of 10, that person I'm looking for who is not a 40-year-old man will rise to the top. They'll have the skills I'm looking for. They'll have the abilities. They'll have the right credentials. But there are times in which it's the way in which it is. You do have to look at it if you're trying to create a diverse team. But that's, again, no reason not to self-identify.
Okay. Here's a bigger question. George asked the question, kind of what part of your organization is Black? So there's some way, like just realistically, people assume that because there's a Black CIO that, man, there's just a massive number of Black people working in technology at your firm. And so I'll give you a chance to clarify that. And then What are the biggest challenges facing you as a C-suite executive, lacking or diversity or being open to change in the organization? So kind of the first part is how Black is your organization? I don't have a better way to put that. And do you feel some pressure as a Black executive to help balance that? Or in some instances, some people feel like they have to be careful about the balancing act to not overreach. And we'll start with you, Van. We've been pressing Jeff to go first in all of these situations.
I like this question. I would say at iManage, we are very diverse, and they're Black people. That would be Black men and women across the organization in various roles. So it's not like you're in this bubble or that certain thing. I would say that we are a very diverse organization. And it's something that actually attracted me to the organization. And at a previous company, we were very diverse. So I'm very happy that I've been in organizations that have been in those positions. Some of the challenges that I would say that face a C-suite person is that at the level, most cases will probably be the only C-suite person that's there, or the VP or senior leader. And so the thrust is, how do you change that? So now you start looking at the organizational construct or structure to sort of say, hey, are they picking individuals because of their race or color, or the things like that? And again, this sort of goes into a much deeper conversation. I hinted on this one though in my CIO post. It is at times terrifying, that you are like the only one, because you're carrying the moniker of, I'm Black and I got to make sure I do the right thing. Because if I F this up, everybody behind me, they're going to get a side eye.
Right.
And so I strongly think that as a level of maturity, we have to be the best as possible and provide that example and be the guiders for that.
Okay, awesome. Jeff.
Yeah, at my company at Potbelly, it's depends on where you are in the organization, right? So it's a company of just at about 5,500 to 6,000 total team members, and I would say, like most companies in the restaurant business, the lower the level the employee, the more diverse it is. The higher you go, the less diverse it is. So we have diversity amongst our team members and shift leads and general managers, and then the higher you go, it starts to go away. The challenge that I see is it goes back to making sure that your C-suite peers understand who you are and they see other people like that. One of the best things that I saw walking into the board for my particular company is 2 African Americans on the board, and 2 African Americans on the board that were in the technology space. That was beautiful, because that showed that it's not just me. I mean, I wasn't a diamond in the rough. You found someplace on Canal. There are more of us out here, right? And we're doing great work, and so it's really important to showcase. And I love LinkedIn because we're able to showcase each other and just the good works that we're doing within technology. So it's important that your peers in the C-suite see that there are African American or diverse executives that are out there, and you can find them. I'll tell this last story. Maybe 7 or 8 years ago, when the company I was at, the CIO left, and our CEO at the time stressed to HR, I really wish we could find an African American CIO. And I was just shocked that he was saying that. Now, maybe this is 7 or 8 years ago, but I'd like to believe that there were plenty of us back then just didn't look. And maybe we didn't have the technology to be able to share our profiles and to really showcase who we are. But that statement, it's important today that we don't hear that statement. So again, it's about making sure my C-suite peers understand, hey, there's more of us out here. Okay, not that I want them to replace me, but there's more of us out there, you know. So if we need a chief operating officer, if we need a head of HR, you know, they're out there. Okay, it's not that hard to look. You'll find them.
One of the challenges when I spent a lot of time talking with the recruiting community in tech, not just in Chicago, on the East Coast and in the West Coast, and the corporate recruiter's role doesn't really allow them to do a ton of outreach. Moreover, the data shows that kind of 1 in 10 or a little more than 1 of 10 resumes that are in an applicant tracking system actually get viewed by a human. There's another stat that I think it's important to understand too, especially as C-suite executives, to know where, if you are looking for diversity, where are they falling through, and that no two applicant tracking systems are created equally. So meaning the search algorithms that allow the recruiting team to identify people with the right set of skills is challenging. And then you just mix that all into the fact that job applicants don't speak applicant tracking system data layers. And so you mesh that all together, and it's no wonder that less than 12% of people who find a job in a given year find it as a result of submitting a digital resume online.
That's funny. I learned that the hard way too, when I had a recruiter sort of say, "Hey, let me see your resume," and she sent it back with like red ink, was like, "No, we need to put this verbs or words here so the ATS system can basically just take it and just make it look nice." And that was just, me sort of taking a step back and sort of saying, "Oh, I don't know how to best manage this situation, so I need some help." and they helped me with that.
And it's critical because the way that it works, and we're in the space, is when you submit your resume and customize. For those of you who are listening, you're out here submitting resumes. I talked to someone about 2 months ago. He said, "Man, well, can you carve out 30 minutes? I'm struggling trying to find a job." And we didn't have a role for them that we could place them in. But he had submitted 100 resumes and had a couple of interviews, but hadn't really gotten past really the first or second round. And when I asked him the question, I typically ask these same 3 questions to everyone. Do you customize your resume to every job that you apply to? And what I mean by customize, do the words, word for word, letter for letter, phrase for phrase, match near or exact to the job description that the employer is describing? And so this person, it was actually in technical sales. And so in sales, the words business development and other words can be used interchangeably. But if the company uses a certain language, a certain set of words and phrases, it's critical that you match to that company's culture in the way that they describe that. And so I think it's important as job applicants to be aware of the nuances technically in the process of finding a job. So I want to go to a couple of other questions that came up. Will English, what does he say? It hasn't been a problem for him, that being black. And he says, I would say, as for recent, there's been more interest in him because he's black, in being sincere, kind of in a post-COVID, post-Floyd case environment. There has been a hyper interest in black tech talent across America. And so to that the earlier question, it may work to your advantage. The challenge is that the way the data sets are set up, again, in the applicant tracking systems, I don't want to totally nerd out on that again, but they can't connect that ethnic background directly to an individual per se and then pull you up. There isn't a search mechanism for black, so we can just get all the black candidates. And if it were, it probably would be easy, but that's against a lot of rules and regulations from a federal perspective. Let's see here. Darnell had said something. She says she's taken some of her experience off her LinkedIn profile. This is Daryl King. I'm sorry. I've taken some of my experience off my LinkedIn profile and resume and wonder how to work against ageism even after they did that. So ageism is a thing. Or is it a thing? So Van, if you're over 40, in today's environment in technology specifically, is it harder to find a job?
I think the component that's harder when you're over 40 is your experience with newer technologies. So I think it may force you into a particular role at organizations that maybe haven't progressed to different technologies. But I mean, I've been at firms, last 2 big firms I've been in, we have folks that are over 40, but they're continuously learning new technologies. They're on cloud, they're on the new systems. They know all of these things. So I think that the flip is you have to sort of evolve your tech, innovate your tech versus focus on age.
Van, I'm gonna jump in before Jeff answers and just comment on that. And I am not a guest on this show, so I shouldn't be talking this much, but I have to do this because I see it all the time. And so some of the people that connect with me, because I'm also an OG in this tech world, who are over 40 and say, Will, I'm struggling to find the job. I was a director of IT. I've been a CIO in a smaller firm, and now I can't find a role. And what Van, you were just describing about, they worked for a firm whose technology, the company's technology, was kind of 5+ years behind today's modern environment. So where you work and what you do can have an impact on your career outside of that firm. And I want to come back to that, but I'd like to get your feedback. So what happens, and I'll give you a few examples, not to beat up on any industries, but it's primarily industries that have notoriously been conservative. So financial services, insurance companies,
manufacturing.
And manufacturing. And so in those instances, I'll come back and ask, what can those people do to keep their skills sharp? I want to put a pin in that, but give Jeff a chance to respond to the original question.
Well, I mean, first, I think 40 might be 50 now.
50 is a new 40?
I think that is the case. At the end of the day, Van's spot on. You have to kind of sharpen your tools, right? So if you are a Java developer in the early 2000s, well, you know what? Those are big companies that are looking for Java developers and probably looking for somebody at a much lower wage than what you're commanding. So you may have to retool into a different language. Okay. And if you retool into a different language, you may not be able to go to Google or Facebook or any of the big guys. You may have to find the mid-tier player, if not the smaller player that's looking for somebody to keep their systems afloat. We built this .NET application 7 years ago. We don't have the ability to overhaul it into something more modern. I need somebody to keep it afloat. There are plenty of positions for folks like that. And so if you're over 40, 50, I think you really have to take a look at your skill set and understand, one, can I upgrade my skill set? And two, am I being real with myself? Okay. If I'm upgrading my skill set, am I upgrading to the latest and greatest? And am I able to compete with the guy who is the latest and greatest, and he's 32 years old and just came out of coding boot camp or just came out of school? If you're real with yourself, you'll find that there are a whole host of jobs where your skill set is needed. It's much like the old mainframe days. Those guys are locked in, man. They have jobs for life in healthcare, right? Healthcare, financial services. But that you realize where you're needed, tool for where you're needed, and understand where you're targeting. I've found a couple of times that folks in their late 40s or early 50s are really not targeting the right space. So I don't know if I wouldn't say it's ageism, but at the same time, if I see a candidate that has a stack of skills that are more relevant, and you have the one skill that I'm necessarily looking for, I may take that person with the stack of skills. And so you may think it's ageism, but it's not always ageism. I think you just have to be real with what you're looking at.
And staying a student is absolutely critical in technology. I don't care who you are and what you know today. If you're 28 right now, I promise you in 5 years, what you're doing won't be the same. If you I always describe it this way: if there are 3 engineers sitting next to each other, one of them is working on putting one of them out of business.
Hey, I was a Solaris guy way back in the day. You will be me at some point in time. So if you're a guy today, you'll be here. If you're a Java guy, you'll be here one day. So.
Got it. I want to switch gears. There was an earlier question I missed from Abraham, and the question was, do you guys have any advice for networking in a new city environment? And I would also say in a virtual environment, right? So meetups and the types of things that used to happen where people could physically connect. What are some of your ideas and thoughts about networking?
I think it's very relevant, even more important now in these times. Even so, if you look at my scenario, I've got a little one running around, so after hours we were in the office, I had to make a choice. Do I I run home or do I try and attend this networking event? Just to sort of meet folks and stay relevant inside of the industry. But I do think that, you know, these things are very important these days, and I think these are just stepping stones for us toward the future. And in Chicago, I mean, there's tech is all over Chicago, and I think we have a great opportunity. And Chicago reaches out. Folks look in Chicago to go to San Francisco, to go to New York, for other areas. So it's important. And if you look at like meetups and other things like that, I'm working with Blacks and for technology, right now. It's sort of rebranding of the name Built, but I'm working with them now is to help. How do you get more people of color in these things, and just exposure to these things? So I think it's very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jay?
Yeah. I think you have to take a look at, inside your own company, find out, what organizations, what groups folks belong to in your company. There are a ton of networking events in Chicago, and I'm talking a little bit pre-COVID. I mean, there are a lot of things going on from a virtual perspective right now, but there are a number of networking events specific to your particular interest in Chicago, but you have to explore within your company first, within your friend set, and then, as we said before, it's networking. Build from there, and you continue to build from there, and you start to find the networking groups that you're most interested in. But I think the best place to start is, hell, look at your leadership. What groups do they belong to? What organizations do they belong to? And you will filter and find 15 organizations within no time. Last thing I'll say on that, LinkedIn is your friend. It'll make the connections for you. So just figure out, who's involved in what organization. You'll quickly find what something that you'll fit within.
And I would chime in on this too. I'm an aggressive networker, or some would describe as a master networker, and I think it's absolutely critical in career success specifically for Blacks in technology. One, in your networking, begin to meet and build your network with people who don't look like you. So if you're female, expand your relationships beyond just other women. If you're a person of color, if you're Black, if you meet other people who are not Black, meet people who look like your boss and your boss's boss, and build relationships there, because that's where the network connection, that's where you become a part of the employee referral systems that create opportunity. I see Will English pointed out, listed hackathons, startup incubators. And the great thing about COVID right now, since everything's virtual, and we just happen to be in Chicago, and there are people on this call from DC, from Atlanta, from the West Coast. Join hackathons, events, and meetups and meetings in other places, because your goal is to meet people, and people aren't just connected to people who live a couple miles from them. So many of us who've been in technology for greater than a decade have probably worked in another state. Chicago seems to be a place that a lot of us stick, but there are people all over the place. And very often there might be opportunities with someone in Chicago in their firm in another city. So don't limit yourself to just people already, or people that you're connected to. And the next question should be, well, how do I do that, right? And for those of you, and I can't say I'm a part of the us, but who are introverts in technology, the outreach process can be a little uncomfortable. And so I think it starts with a basic introduction, and lead with help. If you want someone to help you, figure out a way to help them solve a problem. I think about how Van and I met. I think Van's CIO, and this is a true story, so this is unprepared. Van could have said, well, man, I can't deal with you, man. I don't know you. Van and I were connected on LinkedIn for a while, and I read CIO magazine religiously. So I'm always trying to be aware of what's on the mind of CIOs. And I was like, wait a minute. I know this guy who's in this article. And I was like, there aren't that many Black faces. So let me reach out to him. I was like, dude, great article, great comments. So again, if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. But do you mind if I share this? Because I don't want to just put this out to the world and you don't want it to the world. And he's like, yeah, cool, no problem. And great read. I would tell you, I don't know, 6,000 people looked at it. It was kind of ridiculous. And I'm not really that great on social media, but I wanted to share it back. I was like, man, Van, there's a lot of people who enjoyed what you had to say. You should come and be on Cocktails, Tech, and Opportunities, since we're doing this in the evening, and just talk more about your story. He was like, I'm in. It was easy. And so this is a great example of giving before you ask, and providing help. And I don't care what level you are, I promise you can help someone. So if I'm trying to get to Jeff Douglas and I see that Potbelly is looking for a sysad, I'm going to show up and say, hey, I know a guy who can fill this role for you. I'm going to give you something. So then if I come back and say, you know what, I need a mentor. And here's what mentoring looks like to me. If we can get together for coffee once a quarter, whether virtually or whatever that looks like, could you give me 30 minutes over 4 times a year, right? At your discretion. And what I'll do for you is help feed these people at this level because this is my network. And then Jeff might say, that's a decent trade. That's a decent trade for me. And there could be something else that he may need help or support with. And so I think it's important that you make time. And and this is really in response to a comment that was made earlier about someone saying that we don't do enough in our community from a networking perspective. I'm going to go to Joe Martin real quick, and then we're going to get close to closing. We're a little over. Do you feel the recent uptick in remote work or from home opportunities will be a positive or negative for people of color and technology, specifically because it's so hard to bond with people virtually? What do you think, Van?
Go ahead, Dan, if you want to jump in.
I think I know this is sort of the end of the question, but I think that it does create a bit of a challenge. But I think that this should just push us to look at other ways to communicate. I think that, now let's say it's 7 o'clock in Chicago now. Typically I wouldn't be on the computer, having a session like this at this point. So I think that you have to figure out ways how to sort of keep that networking cycle going and meeting new people. So I think that you really have to figure out what's the right time and the right cadence of these conversations, and then the audiences, because those are definitely beneficial.
Awesome. Jeff?
Yeah. I think it presents its challenges, but it also presents its opportunities. It goes back to what I was saying before. I'm inviting you into my house on a daily basis with meetings. You see what's on my bookshelf behind me. You see my family. You see my dog. So if I'm being true to myself, you get to know who I am. I need to be that person when I'm in the office. And that's what's important. So if you're in the office, you're not that same person, or your home life or how you are at home is totally different than how you are in the office. That could be a challenge. But I think that's why I go back to what I was saying is the more you make everybody comfortable with who you are, knowing you fit within the company and knowing you fit within the skill sets that are needed, you enjoy your coworkers and they enjoy you, but they also understand you are from a diverse background. You're from a diverse family. If I had a cross back here because I'm deeply religious, you need to understand that and respect it and accept it. So there could be a challenge, but I think it's also an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity for your coworkers to learn more about you and to be accepting of who you are, so that when we are back in the office in 2021, crossing my fingers, they get to know you. They know a little bit more about you.
Yeah. And we're run over a little bit, so I want to give you both an opportunity. If you want to espouse any other knowledge points to the team, or anything that you're working on, any community things that you're involved in that you want to share or talk about, we'll give a couple of minutes to that, and then we'll get ourselves prepared to bring it to a close so that everyone can finish their beverages. Again, this is Cocktails, Tech, and Opportunity. Van, we've been pounding you back to back, so we'll let Jeff go first on this one.
So first, let me say this, Will. I appreciate the time. This is a great opportunity. Great to meet you, Van. I'm surprised we haven't met before, but when you were talking about that mentor in the bookstore, maybe I have met that mentor. That seemed very familiar to me. I would say this. There's a tremendous opportunity in technology for those of color. And if you think it is all about learning, JavaScript or .NET or Java or whatever programming language, that's not it. There's plenty out there. And I'm not saying that programming is not, software development is not the way to go, but there are a lot of opportunities in technology. And so seek out those who are in technology and ask as many questions as possible. You know, be my 14-year-old son and just continue to ask until I just say, go away. Ask, and you'll find the right opportunity. This is a tremendous career. I think it was Van may agree, is probably the best thing that, you know, I could have done way back when is to get in this particular industry, this particular business. But there is just a tremendous amount of opportunity from now and for the next years, many years. So just take advantage of that. Find the people that are around you. Ask, inquire.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And Jeff, you are an accounting major by education. And check out this guy's background, Jeff Douglas. He looks just like the photo. He hasn't aged in 10 years. I don't know what he's taken. And so, but what I would say is definitely check this guy out on LinkedIn. And you can see his career progression. So for those of you who are considering career pivots, he's a great example of that. It's possible. Van, closing thoughts from you.
No, thanks, Will, for the forum. I think it's a great conversation. And sort of your story is 100% correct that you sent me notes and we hadn't quite gotten together. But yeah, I'm very happy, and I've got team members that are on the call, sort of looking at the rest of this, and I just think that overall, the ability to sort of show that there are other things that you can do, I think it's very important as well. And then meeting, obviously, Jeff, it's been great too. And you're probably right that we know that same person who no longer lives in Chicago.
There you go.
But in any case, I think it's the COVID times obviously have given everybody a different sort of shift of their priorities, and I think that this just gives us another opportunity to sort of reskill and expand those networking groups.
Awesome. And as we close, I'll just say this, that there's never been a better time to be Black in technology anywhere in the country or in the globe. The opportunities are endless. And to what Jeff was saying earlier, building a career in technology doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be you have to be a software engineer or Scrum Master. There's a lot of opportunity in tech sales at every level, roles in leadership, roles in project management, roles in digital marketing, product development, huge opportunities. I think the way you find your path is to what Jeff was saying, to what Van was saying, ask questions. And the more questions that you're asking about career progression, the more you'll find that people will be interested in helping you make that progress. And so talk to your boss, talk to your boss's boss. If you run into, today's world, you don't necessarily run into someone at the water cooler, but if you're the first person on the Zoom call and whomever it is, it's a great time to talk to them about how they got started. It's an easy way to break the ice. I've never found that anyone who wasn't willing to tell me their story, and I can tell you nearly every time I've ever asked, the story that comes back is unreal. So thank you for joining us for Cocktails, Tech, and Opportunity. I'm having water with an ice cube tonight. I hope all of you are doing something fun. We will continue to make investments in the Black tech community and provide career nourishment and bring together executives that are hard to find. Because at Black Tech Jobs, we hunt the unicorns. Thanks again for spending time with us this evening. Be safe. Bye now.